Avery moved away a few years ago. After the death of her husband, she had no one to do anything with. Her son lived far away, her relatives mostly called during vacations, and she didn't want to impose herself. There were days when she really wanted to talk, but there was only the cat and the television. Then Avery put on her favorite coat, took a stick in her hand, and went to the entrance or to the park to find someone to accompany her. She immediately noticed a group of 3 women. The ladies seemed familiar to her, and it turned out that she actually knew them. They all lived in the neighborhood and were of a similar age. Ella, a lonely pensioner, lived in the first building. Grace, a lady with a dog, lived in the house, and Elizabeth visited her son once a week. There were other women who later got to know Avery, but these neighbors were particularly close to her. Each of them had their own daily routine, but almost everyone went for an afternoon walk. Walking alone was boring, so they would meet at the entrance and occasionally go to a nearby park. There, the women would sit on a bench and chat. They would exchange news, talk about what was happening with their families, or simply discuss the weather. Fortunately, there was plenty of conversation. The complex was inhabited, and almost everyone knew each other. The young people, of course, avoided such contacts, but the older residents enjoyed chatting and discussing the new tenants. For the sake of simplicity, the women even exchanged their phones and started planning these walks by creating a schedule. And that's how it was this time. Avery got up, had breakfast, fed the cat, checked the thermometer, thought about what to wear, and got ready for a walk. Grace was waiting for her at the entrance. Her dwarf poodle, Tyler, really wanted to go to the park with her, but the ladies decided to wait for Ella. She was late that day for some reason. Elizabeth visited her son on Wednesdays, so this time they went for a walk without her. Ella takes a long time to get ready. Maybe something happened, asked Ljudmila Michailona. No, I called her. It's all right. It's just that her son brought his granddaughter to visit her. Does she have a granddaughter? Not a grandson. This is a complicated story. The son married a second time and took a girl with a child. He also had a child with his first wife, his own child. Now, Ella doesn't care about the grandchild, but she has to take care of the girl. Why didn't she talk about it? She doesn't like to talk about it. It annoys her. I understand, nodded Avery. She wondered why Ella had agreed to take care of the child of another person. But it was uncomfortable to ask her directly, so she decided to wait for Ella told her. The opportunity was surprisingly quick. The door to the first entrance opened and Ella came out. But she didn't get out alone, but with a little girl by the hand. Ladies, good day. I am here with Scarlett today. Do you mind? No, it is a pleasure for us, smiled Avery. Scarlett was a quiet, modest little girl. She looked about 5 years old. Ella wanted to say something, but suddenly paused when she saw a car drive up in front of the house. The women looked curiously at the car from which a young man exited. A woman who was a little older than him followed behind him. Ella pressed her lips together and wanted to turn away, but the woman looked at her and suddenly said loudly, "Here is she, your new granddaughter? Oh, and don't you feel ashamed to go out with her? Well, there is no such thing in our family. We have no shame. You should be ashamed to come here." Why should I be ashamed? I came home. Home? Yes, I live here with my friend. Owen, I would like to introduce you to my ex-mother-in-law. She lives on the doorstep and coexists with the tenants and anyone else who gets in her way. She has a sharp tongue, a lot of poison, and a cold-blooded disregard for family values. Owen gave Ella an honest look and switched off the alarm system. Without saying a word, he took the woman under his arm and led her to the entrance area, while her neighbors watched in amazement. Ella left. She was very unhappy that her daughter-in-law had diminished her in the eyes of intelligent women. She had to redeem herself and change the topic. How much do you want? How old is he? 18 years old. She is old enough to be his grandmother. Ella threw back to her ex-sister-in-law. To be honest, she has exaggerated a bit. Her son's ex-wife looked pretty young. She was dressed in a modern way, had a nice hairstyle, and you noticed that she took care of herself. Her friend looked like the cover picture of a magazine. He was clearly over 18 years old, but of course Ella saw it differently. "Let's go to the park," Avery reminded her. "Yes, we're going." The women pretended that everything was as always, but it was obvious that Ella was annoyed, and the granddaughter stopped being modest and began to whine. She did not like the society of foreign aunts. She wanted to go to her mother. "Muddy is busy. Come on, let's go for a walk. Go to the sandpit and play there. Here are a few toys." Ella tried to distract the child, but it did not agree. "That's why I don't like babysitting," Grace said. "They tried to impose the duty of babysitting on me, but I refused. I would do it. It's more fun. But my son is in no rush to have kids, even though it's long overdue," Avery sighed. "You're just saying that. Believe me, when they give you grandchildren and you hold them all weekend, you'll remember what I said." "No, you have to make your point clear." Grace adjusted her hat. "Even that doesn't always help," Ella complained, nodding to Scarlett. "I told my son, don't bring the baby to me. She doesn't listen to me, and he took offense. His wife wants attention from him. She has to go out all the time. Then to a restaurant, then to a concert, and now she's made him get a gym membership. You can't take a child there. So while the mother is at the gym, you take care of her daughter." Grace raised her eyebrows. "Well, I can't say no. You are young, newly married. They need to be together, and Scarlett always gets in the way." "Does she have a grandmother?" "Yes, she has. But she's like you, Grace." "What do you mean?" "She immediately said that she doesn't take the girl on weekends. She sometimes helps during the week, but weekends are off limits to her grandchildren. She uses this time for herself to restore her resources, as they say these days." "You're so smart, so your own grandmother can rest, but you have to sacrifice your time. You have to tell your son again that you can't stand this. You need to approach him more forcefully. Having a child isn't your problem, it's theirs," Grace snorted. Avery didn't know whether to agree with her neighbor. On the one hand, she was right that the girl had a grandmother. But then again, was it so hard to help her son when he asked? "That's what I want to say. I won't accept anything anymore. I gave up my grandson so I could leave the girl hanging. Tell me you have other interests. For example, I have a dog. That's enough for me to not feel lonely. And who will bring you a glass of water in your old age? If you're always rejected, sooner or later you'll be rejected," Avery said. "I'll teach Tyler. He already knows how to get slippers," Grace laughed. "I made a video of him bringing me slippers. My cat will bring me everything if I don't feed him on time. For example, an empty bowl," Avery said. The women smiled as they talked about the funny animals. The tension eased a little. "Well, Scarlett, it's time to go home." Ella looked at her clock after a while. The girl who had just calmed down and played in the sandpit started again. This time, she didn't want to walk the walk this time. "Okay, don't cry. I'll call you now and ask you to get you away from here." While the women discussed the unfavorable parking in the park and the fact that too many cars drove through the city, Ella called her son, and he and his new wife came to pick up her daughter. "Yes, we are on the playground. We are waiting," said Ella. Avery had seen the neighbor's son, but had not yet met his new wife. How big was her surprise when a slim little girl, about 18 years old, came up with her. A real teenager when it came to figure and clothing. From behind, she looked like a schoolgirl. "Hello, Scarlett, let's go home," she said. The girl dropped the shovel and the bucket and ran to her mother. "Thank you for sat down," thanked the new daughter-in-law and went. "Ella, how old is she?" asked Avery. "I cannot remember the details." "She is his student, isn't she?" reminded Grace, and Ella nodded. "Yes, he taught her." "Oh, I understand. How old is the son?" 5 and 45, replied Eloise. Avery pursed her lips. She had nothing against her neighbor's son, but the situation at the entrance started playing in her mind. An old daughter-in-law with a young 18-year-old man on her arm, and a new daughter-in-law who was more than half as old as her husband. Avery didn't immediately notice what exactly was bothering her, but only after escorting Ella to the post office. So then, until tomorrow, ladies. We'll see each other in the same place, said the neighbor. Until then, said the women, waved to say goodbye, and went home. Still, it's strange. Double morality, don't you find it too? Asked Grace as they walked up the entrance. What are you actually talking about? Ella. Well, her reaction to her daughter-in-law. What's wrong with it? She called her a grandmother, and the fact that the son went to a young woman and left this grandmother with a child is not embarrassing. Avery thought for a moment, but didn't answer. She drew certain conclusions, but did not dare to discuss them with her neighbor. Nevertheless, everyone has the right to a private life, at any age, she thought.